Apple, you had such a simple job. I laid out the plans for you earlier this year. I made a video explaining what to prioritize with the next generation iPhones. It was fairly simple. There were three main things. You didn't even have to do all three of them. You just had to do one of them, and you couldn't do any of them. For those who don't remember, the three were 120 Hertz, a ProMotion display, or USB-C, or do something with the notch. Make the notch smaller, shrink it down a little bit, or something like that. Now with the latest leaks of the iPhone 12, it feels like Apple didn't do any of those things. That's right, 120 Hertz. It's not happening on the iPhone 12. Let's begin. I really want to be wrong on this one, guys. I cannot emphasize that enough. It would bring so much joy to my heart if you guys sent this video to me a few months down the road and be like, look how wrong Drew was. He thought the iPhone 12s weren't going to have 120 Hertz, and then they ended up having them, and he was just so wrong. This video aged like milk. That would be wonderful. I want that to happen. But based on what we're hearing from supply chains and reports right now about the iPhone 12, it's not going to happen. And yes, I'm referring to the Pros, by the way, not the regular iPhone 12s. That wasn't really up for discussion. We're talking about the $1,000 or $1,200 iPhones this year that we all were really hoping was going to get a ProMotion display. But it sounds like it could be potentially out of Apple's hands entirely. Samsung obviously manufactures most of the OLED displays for the world. And of course, Apple orders the largest number of smartphones in bulk. And Samsung, because they kind of compete directly with Apple, they get to decide who gets their hands on the OLED displays and who gets access to what type of OLED displays. And from what we heard from leakers, people kept going back and forth on 120 Hertz. Either it is going to have it, it's not going to have it, it has the hardware for it, but they might not do it because it's not up to their standards or it's not going well through testing and that kind of stuff. All of that could pretty much be made up. There's no way for us to go back and disprove those reports, which is why I kind of hate them, because if 120 Hertz happens, then the leakers say, see, I told you, and if it doesn't happen, well, they say, well, I told you it might not happen, so I was right anyway. I get annoyed by all that, but Ross Young has a very reputable track record, and he got the display specs of so many phones over the past year exactly right, because, again, he has contacts within actual display manufacturing supply chains, and he said multiple times now that it is not happening with the iPhone 12 series. There may have been some display panel somewhere that was capable of 120 Hertz, but sadly, there's a lot more than just the display being 120 Hertz compatible that needs to happen in order for the phone to actually support it. And he's saying that the display IC drivers are not present on the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max, which means that it's not some type of software thing. It's not something they can just switch on if they want to one day, or some of you out there hoping, well, I'll jailbreak my 12 Pro and force 120 Hertz to go on. That's not the case. It's kind of like the same arguments we heard before of people saying the iPhone 11 has the hardware for bilateral wireless charging. They just decided to scrap it via software at the last minute, whereas teardowns revealed down the road that they were actually missing some of the physical hardware necessary for bilateral wireless charging to be a thing, which is why you never saw someone brute force turn it on through a teardown or jailbreak their iPhone and turn it on and that kind of thing. Sounds like the hardware is physically not going to be there because you need these driver ICs in order to have a 120 Hertz display. And to my point about maybe Samsung having some responsibility here, or maybe just not having the capability, is that Apple likely wanted this LTPO display panel just like they have with the Apple Watch Series 5 because they want a variable refresh rate with a 120 Hertz, right? Because obviously running displays at this buttery smoothness causes a lot more battery drain, and if you can make a variable refresh rate and the display go all the way down to 1 Hertz all the way up to 120 and go anywhere in between, so that if you're watching a 24 FPS video, the refresh rate drops down to 24. That type of display technology does exist, but it's likely that Samsung is unable to produce those type of displays at the same quality or at the same caliber, at the scale that Apple wants them to, because they're doing these type of displays on things like the Galaxy Note 20 right now. They actually have those LTPO display panels that can change, and that way they preserve battery life at the same time allowing for a really rich, buttery smooth display. But the Galaxy Note series sells very low in quantity relative to the iPhones. We're talking single-digit millions here, sometimes not even that in the first few months of being out. So manufacturing a bunch of OLED displays for that phone is not as complicated as Apple saying saying, you know, we want tens of millions of a certain display panel that we're going to use for the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max. Since Samsung is selling phones directly and manufacturing displays for themselves and others, they kind of get first dibs on these types of features. And I'm not saying it's completely Samsung's fault. I hope that's not the message you guys get from this. It's just that it's very, very plausible that it might be outside of Apple's jurisdiction, and they may have wanted 120 hertz on this year's iPhones, but simply because of the supply chains and Samsung wanting first dibs on these panels and not being able to produce enough panels for Apple's demand, it just wasn't possible, which sucks because, in my opinion, this is a massive missing feature for a flagship smartphone that's going to be in the $1,000 plus department. And you know, these phones, especially the 12 Pro, are launching in November, so that means the majority of the 12 Pro's life is going to be in 2021. This is going up against the Galaxy S21, and it's going up against the OnePlus 8T Pro, all of which already have 120 hertz displays today on OLED panels on big screens. And the fact that the iPhone is still going to be stuck in 60 hertz land for a whole nother year likely makes the 12 Pro an incredibly hard to justify deal. And I know there's a bunch of you out there saying, I don't notice the difference, I don't think it's that big a deal, I don't know why you're complaining about it. Why are you watching the video on the subject then? Huh? Okay, look, we took the polls, we collected the data. It is reasonable to believe we have a large portion of people that were only interested in the iPhone 12 Pro if it had 120 hertz, and the fact that it doesn't means that they're either going to skip the iPhone this year or they're just going to settle with the regular 12 and 12 Max, which I hope you guys are happy with. I don't think the iPhone 12 is going to be a giant flop this year. I just think the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max are going to have very, very little reasons to upgrade, and very few people are going to end up going with those iPhones just because all they got going for them is stainless steel, frosted glass, telephoto lens, LiDAR, all very, very small details I don't think most people are going to care about, and the fact that there's not so many screen size variety between the cheap iPhone and the expensive iPhone this year. 12 and 12 Max, they will sell great, no doubt there, but a lot of the time when I complain about a company not having a standard feature or being behind in a certain topic or a certain field, a lot of people say, well, Drew, why didn't you complain when Apple was behind? Or why didn't you say something when Apple wasn't here? The truth is, I usually do. You're usually just not listening or paying attention, and today's video is my proof that yes, sometimes I do think Apple is behind in certain categories, and this is one of them. I think seeing the industry move on with 120 hertz and expecting that to be standard now for $1,000 phones, I'm gonna bring that up, and I think that's a huge drawback, and especially a sad one given Apple has been doing 120 hertz on the iPad for 3 years now. After 3 years of it existing with your iPad line, you still can't figure out how to put it on your iPhone. The display technology exists, your competitors are doing it. How come you couldn't make it happen? Might be out of their hands, I know, but still, I'm mad at the end result. I'm mad at the product that should have had it this year, but for some reason it's not going to now. And also, yes, I have on the record said that I think the iPhone 7 was late to wireless charging. The iPhone didn't get NFC as soon as it should have. There's all kinds of things Apple is late to that I'm not always happy about. This is absolutely one of them, and again, I know a lot of you don't care, but from what I've seen in the comments section and what most people are asking about when it comes to Twitter or YouTube, this is by far one of the top requested, top points of discussion when it comes to the next iPhone. I see it at the top of every thread. Will it have 120 hertz? Will it have 120 hertz? People want to know about this. I'm here to tell you today, it's not gonna happen. If it does, I'll be pleasantly surprised, but I also want to set your guys' expectations going into the next few months when we finally see these new iPhones. I still think there's gonna be a lot of great things about them, a lot of things people should be excited for. I'm definitely still picking one up, but I'm disappointed nonetheless. Honestly, I would have been happy if Apple checked any one of those 3 boxes that we talked about earlier this year, and it is kind of sad that they weren't able to achieve any of them, but I'm still excited for updated design language, A14 chip, and having OLED standard across the lineup. You know, most people buying new iPhones are still buying the ones with an LCD display. So the fact that OLED is now going to be standard is going to be kind of new to people, and seeing how the cameras perform, hopefully they utilize LiDAR in a creative way. There's stuff I'm still excited for. It's not like Apple is doomed this year, you know. They got to a $2 trillion market cap without 120 hertz on the iPhone, so obviously they're going to be fine. It's just, I hate knowing that all of the Android competition is going to be ahead of them in this particular field, and I don't want to wait till next year for 120 hertz. I want it now. I was mentally ready for it now, but that's enough ranting, I think, for today. So let me know what you guys think of no 120 hertz by hitting me up over on Twitter, join my Discord, and if you don't care, I don't care, okay? Keep that in mind. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.